The attorney was already seated when I walked through the door. He was a man I had never seen before, thin, wearing a dark blue suit that was slightly too large for his shoulders, holding a leather folder across his lap. He looked up when I came in. He did not smile. My husband was standing by the fireplace. My son was on the couch. My daughter-in-law, Brenda, sat beside him with her arms crossed and her chin lifted the way she always did when she was certain she had already won something. I was still holding my purse. I had just come from the cemetery. The dirt on my shoes was still damp. "Patricia," my husband said, "we've been waiting." I looked at the four of them. I looked at the attorney. I looked at the folder in his lap. "Can I set my things down first?" I said. Nobody answered. I set my purse on the small table by the door anyway. I took off my coat. I hung it on the hook where I had hung it every day for 31 years. My hands were steady. I don't know why. Everything inside me had already gone very quiet, the way a house goes quiet after a storm has passed through it, and you're standing in the middle of the wreckage, looking around, not yet ready to understand what you're seeing. I sat in the chair across from the attorney. "Mrs. Kit Calloway," he said. "My name is Douglas Hale. I represent the estate of your mother, Dorothy May Sutton." I nodded. "Mrs. Sutton passed away on the 14th, as you know. I'm here today because there are matters regarding her estate that require your attention." He opened the folder, specifically the disposition of the property at 412 Birchwood Lane. That was my mother's house, the house I grew up in. The house where I had learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I had sat with her every Thursday afternoon for the last 6 years, drinking coffee and watching her shows when she couldn't follow the plots anymore. The house where 3 weeks ago I had slept on a cot in the hallway because she was afraid and didn't want to be alone in the night. "Your mother," Douglas Hale said, "left the property at 42012 Birchwood Lane to your husband, Gerald Calloway, and to your son, Marcus Calloway, in equal shares. The room was very quiet. She also left a sum of $11,000 to be divided equally among her grandchildren." He turned a page. "The remainder of her personal belongings, with the exception of items already listed in the document, are to be donated to St. Bridget's Church." I did not move. "There is one additional item." He reached into the folder and produced a small sealed envelope. He held it toward me. "This was included with the will. It's addressed to you." I took it. My name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting, which had gotten shaky over the last year, but was still hers. Still the looping cursive she had used on every birthday card she had ever sent me. I held it in both hands. "Patricia," Gerald said. He was still standing by the fireplace. "The attorney has something else to tell you." Douglas Hale cleared his throat. He looked at me the way people look at you when they've been paid to deliver something they personally find unpleasant. "Given the transfer of property ownership, Mr. B. Calloway has indicated that he intends to sell the Birchwood Lane property. Before that can proceed, he and Mr. Marcus Calloway are requesting that you remove any personal items you may have stored there." He paused. "They'd like that done within the next few days." My son had not looked at me once since I sat down. "A few days," I said. "The property goes to market at the end of the month." I looked at Gerald. 31 years. We had been married 31 years. We had been married 31 years. I had worked the front desk at Norbert Family Practice for 22 of those years, and when my mother's memory started going, when she started leaving the stove on and wandering to the end of the driveway in her nightgown looking for my father, who had been dead for 12 years, I cut back to 2 days a week, then 1. Then I stopped altogether. Gerald had said it was the right thing to do. He had said, "She's your mother, Patricia. Of course you should be there for her." And I had believed that he meant it the way I meant it. I looked at Brenda. She was studying her fingernails. I looked at my son. He was 28 years old. I had sat beside him when he had his tonsils out. I'd driven him to baseball practice and math tutoring and, later, to the DMV 3 times because he failed the driving test twice. I had lent him $4,000 when he and Brenda bought their first car, and he had never once mentioned paying it back. He was still not looking at me. "All right," I said. I stood up. I picked up the envelope with my name on it. I held it against my chest. "That's it," Gerald said. "You're not going to say anything?" "What would you like me to say, Gerald?" He opened his mouth. He closed it again. I picked up my purse from the table by the door. I took my coat off the hook. I walked out. I sat in my car in front of the house for a long time without starting it. It was November. The trees on our street had already lost most of their leaves. The Hendersons' dog was barking somewhere down the block, the same short bark it always did in the afternoon, and the sound of it was so ordinary and so familiar that it made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. I did not open the envelope. I had made a decision somewhere between the attorney's folder and the front door that I was not going to open it until I was somewhere else. I don't know why. Maybe because my mother had always told me not to read important letters in front of an audience. She said you never knew what your face was going to do and some things were private. I drove to the Birchwood Lane house instead. I had a key. I had always had a key. My mother had given it to me 15 years ago and renewed it twice when she changed the locks. The spare was on my key ring, next to my car key, where it had lived for so long I had stopped noticing it. I let myself in. The house smelled the way it always did, like old wood in the lavender sachets my mother kept in the closets, and underneath that, something I couldn't name that was just her. Just the smell of the place where she had lived for 40 years. I stood in the entryway for a long moment. Her cardigan was still on the hook by the door. Pale blue, the one she wore on cool mornings when she wasn't going anywhere. I touched the sleeve. The texture of it was so familiar that my throat tightened in a way it hadn't at the cemetery, not even when they lowered the casket. I walked through the room slowly. The living room. Her chair by the window, angled toward the television and the bird feeder she liked to watch in the mornings. The side table with her reading glasses and her library book, still there, still splayed open face down to the page she'd been on when she went into the hospital the last time. I made a note to return it. The kitchen. Her coffee mug on the drying rack. A grocery list on the refrigerator in her handwriting. Milk, English muffins, the good orange juice. Things she had never gotten to buy. Her bedroom. The quilt she'd had since before I was born, worn thin at the center from years of use. The framed photograph on her nightstand. Her and my father, young, somewhere with palm trees, grinning at whoever was behind the camera. I sat on the edge of her bed. I sat there for a while. Then I took the envelope out of my pocket. My name on the front. Her handwriting. I opened it carefully, the way she had always taught me to open things. Don't tear, find the edge, take your time. Inside was a single folded sheet of her pale yellow stationery, the kind she ordered from a catalog every Christmas, and beneath it, a business card with a paperclip attached to it. I read the letter first. My Patricia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I imagine things have already gotten unpleasant. I'm sorry for that. I want you to know that I knew, even when I couldn't always find the right words to say so. I knew who came every week. I knew who sat with me when I was frightened. I knew whose voice I recognized, even on the bad days when I couldn't always remember the names to go with the faces. I knew it was you. I also knew what was happening around me, even when people assumed I didn't. Old women are underestimated, Patricia. It has its uses. I want you to call the number on that card. His name is Robert Finch. He has worked for me for 11 years, and he is the only attorney who has seen the real document. The one I had drawn up in 2019 and updated last spring. What Douglas Hale read today is not my will. It is a document Gerald had prepared and brought to me 14 months ago. He told me it was a power of attorney update. I signed it because I was having a bad week, and he sat with me for 2 hours, and I was tired, and I trusted him. I have regretted it since I understood what I had done. Robert Finch has the original. He also has a recording. The house is yours, my darling. It has always been meant for you. I'm sorry it took me until now to make sure of it. I love you. I am so proud of the woman you are. Don't you let them make you small. All my love, Mom. I read it twice. Then I sat very still on the edge of her bed, with the pale yellow paper in my hands, and I looked at the quilt and the framed photograph and the coffee mug on the drying rack. I could see through the open doorway, and I breathed. I was 63 years old. I had raised a son and worked for 2 decades and given up the last years of my working life to care for a woman who had loved me in the uncomplicated, consistent way that is rarer than people understand. I had done all of it without resentment, mostly because it was right and because she was my mother and because some things you do not do for a reward. But I will tell you something. Reading that letter, sitting in her room with the November light coming through the curtains she'd had for 20 years, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't known was clenched. She had known. She had seen me. All that time when I wondered if any of it registered, when I drove home at midnight and Gerald was already asleep and I ate cereal standing over the sink and told myself it didn't matter whether anyone noticed. She had noticed. She had been paying attention the whole time. I folded the letter carefully along its original creases. I put it back in the envelope. I put the business card in my coat pocket. Then I went to make myself a cup of coffee in her kitchen, because I needed a few minutes before I made the call. Robert Finch answered on the second ring. He had a calm, unhurried voice, the kind that doesn't change register when you tell him something serious. I explained who I was. He said, "Mrs. Calloway, I've been expecting your call. Your mother spoke of you often." I told him I had read the letter. "Good," he said. "I'm glad she was able to reach you that way. I want you to know that the document Mr. Hale presented today has no legal standing. Your mother's original will was filed properly and has not been revoked. What Gerald brought her 14 months ago, the document she signed, was prepared under circumstances that constitute undue influence. I have documentation. I also have the recording your mother mentioned, which she made herself on her phone and emailed to me the following day." A brief pause. She was very thorough. My mother had been, her whole life, very thorough. She balanced her checkbook to the penny every Sunday. She kept a small notebook of every repair the house had ever needed, with dates and contractor names. She had apparently, at 79 years old and in the middle of a difficult stretch with her memory, had the presence of mind to record her son-in-law manipulating her and email the evidence to her attorney. I pressed my fingers against my eyes for a moment. "What happens now?" I said. "I've already filed to contest the document presented today. Given the recording in the original will, I don't anticipate a prolonged legal process. The Birchwood Lane property will remain in your name as your mother intended." He paused again. "There may also be consequences for your husband, depending on how the court views the circumstances of that signing. I want to be straightforward with you about that." I thought about Gerald, standing by the fireplace, the way he had said my name, the way he had not, in 31 years, once come with me to sit with my mother on a Thursday afternoon. "Be straightforward with me," I said. He was. Gerald called me 4 times that evening. I did not answer. He came to the Birchwood Lane house, my house, as it turned out, at 8 o'clock. I watched his headlights sweep across the living room curtains. I heard him knock. I did not go to the door. He knocked for a while. Then he stopped. I heard his car start. I heard it pull away. I sat in my mother's chair by the window in the dark, with the television off and the bird feeder just a shape in the yard, and I thought about the last 6 years. I thought about the Thursday afternoons and the midnight drives and the look on my mother's face the morning she woke up frightened, and I was already there, already making her tea, and she had held my hand for a long time without saying anything. I thought about Gerald telling me it was the right thing to do. I thought about what he had decided to do with that. I was not angry exactly. I was something more complicated than angry, something that would take me a long time to fully name, that I think has to do with the specific grief of realizing that a person you trusted chose deliberately to use your goodness against you, to watch you give and then position himself to take. I stayed that night in my mother's house. I slept in her room, under her quilt, and I left her cardigan on the hook by the door. The legal process took 4 months. Robert Finch had been right that it would not be prolonged. The recording was unambiguous. Gerald, on the advice of his own attorney, did not contest the original will once it became clear what the recording contained. The Birchwood Lane property was confirmed as mine. Gerald also faced a separate proceeding regarding the document he had arranged. It did not end well for him, though I will not detail it here except to say that it ended as it should have. Marcus called me 6 weeks in. He did not apologize, not exactly. He said he hadn't known the full situation. I told him that I believed him, and that I also thought he might want to examine what it meant that he hadn't asked more questions. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're right. It was not a reconciliation. It was the beginning of one, maybe. I am patient. I have always been patient." Brenda has not called. I moved into the Birchwood Lane house in March. I packed what I needed from the house Gerald and I had shared. My clothes, my books, the small things that were mine alone, and I left the rest. I did not look back at it as I drove away, though I thought I might. Some departures turn out to be easier than you expected because you have already, without knowing it, been leaving for a long time. The bird feeder in the yard needed refilling. I bought a large bag of sunflower seeds at the hardware store in Maple, the same one my mother had always used. I started coming to the kitchen in the mornings of my coffee and watching the birds the way she used to. Chickadees mostly, and the occasional nuthatch, sometimes a pair of cardinals. My mother had believed that cardinals were visitors, that they meant something. I am not sure I believe that, but I like them. I like sitting in her chair in the morning light with my coffee getting cold beside me, watching them. I went back to work part-time in the spring, not the same practice, a different one, closer to the house. The woman who runs the front desk is named Carolyn, and she has been doing it for 30 years. And on my first day, she brought me a coffee without being asked and said, "You'll do fine here." I think she was right. I am not going to tell you that everything resolved into something clean and simple. It didn't. 63 years is a long time to have been a certain kind of person in a certain kind of life. And when that life changes, even when the change is the right one, there are mornings when you wake up and reach for something that isn't there anymore, and the absence of it is its own weight for a while. But there is also this. The house on Birchwood Lane has good light in the mornings. The neighbors on the left have a dog that barks at the squirrels in a way I have come to find companionable. My mother's books are still on the shelves, and I have started reading the ones I never got to. I have learned that she had excellent taste. Last week I found, tucked in the back of a drawer in her nightstand, a photograph I had never seen. My mother and I at what I think was my high school graduation. She looks young and proud and slightly sunburned, and I am laughing at something off camera with my whole face. I don't remember the moment. I don't know who took it. I had it framed. It's on the nightstand now, where the photograph of her and my father used to be. I moved that one to the dresser. There is room for both of them. I think about what she wrote, near the end of the letter. "I knew it was you." I think about it on the hard mornings and the ordinary ones alike. She knew. She had always known. That is, in the end, enough. It is more than enough. It is more than enough. It is, I have come to understand, everything.